Okay, hi everybody. I just have a couple of notes on my phone. I'm not like on Facebook or anything. So I'm Heather Fiore. I'm a registered dietitian, and I have a practice here in town called Free State Nutrition. And before I even start, I'm going to kind of skip to the end and tell you about the resources that I have on my website, freestatenutrition.com, where you can find out about like books that you might want to get on this topic. There's some podcasts that I recommend on there, and some other great resources too. So just wanted to make sure you were aware of those things. Of course I had to mention books since we're right here at the library, but one of them is actually a workbook. And so, if this is something you really want to do, I would say, get yourself the workbook, pay for it, get yourself a pencil and write in there and really get to work. So that's the best way to do this. So what we're talking about today is how to eat without guilt or shame. And so I want to tell you what that means, why I think it's a problem, and then just some tips about how to, manage that. And I think it's the kind of thing that can be applied to a lot of situations, not just about food. We all kind of have this sort of really critical voice in our own heads. It might be about food, but it might be about, what we, like our grades we get in school, or it might be about our performance at work, or our relationships, or, you name it. This little voice can be really mean in there. And so that's kind of what it's about, is how do we get that voice to be quiet? So just to give you an example of when that voice might show up related to food, a lot of times we decide we're going to start eating better. And it's Monday morning, or it's like the start of the month or the start of the year, and we're like all gung-ho, and I'm gonna eat better, and I'm not gonna eat any sugar, and it doesn't even matter what the details are, but we have these expectations of ourselves, and we say like, I'm not gonna do this, or I am gonna do this, and set out some rules and guidelines. And then maybe you come to work and your colleague brought some donuts, and you're like foiled, right? And so you're thinking, I'm not supposed to eat donuts. I just said I'm not going to eat donuts, and you're doing all this stuff in your head about how you want to eat donuts, but you shouldn't eat donuts, and back and forth, and it's like you use up all your energy all day not eating donuts. And usually what happens is at some point, you're like, well, I'll just have a bite, I'll just have a piece, and you kind of, talk yourself into having the donut, which, by the way, is totally fine. I'm pro donuts. But what happens in your head is then you think, see, you shouldn't have done that. You said you weren't going to, and that's bad for you, and this whole story about why that's a problem and why you are a problem because you did it. And then, so that's basically the mean voice, right? You don't have to tell me if that voice has been in your head, but I'm gonna guess maybe it's not about donuts, but it's about something. We all have it, right? So the problem with this voice and with this line of thinking is that it doesn't stop us from doing the thing that we think it's gonna do, right? Like, we think we're gonna guilt ourselves into doing the right thing, whatever we decide the right thing is. But what ends up happening is it makes this wrong thing even more appealing, and then we eat it, or we do it, or we don't do it, and then we feel bad that we did it, we feel guilty, and then we end up feeling shame. We think, I'm no good at this. See, this is why I can't eat better. I'm no good at it. I don't have enough willpower, or I should be stronger, or this isn't the right plan for me, or some story. So this whole thinking of, I'm gonna make myself feel bad, I'm gonna shame myself into not eating donuts or etc., doesn't work. It actually causes the opposite effect. So this is why this line of thinking isn't helpful, right? And you can imagine in almost any situation, guilt isn't super helpful. We try it. We keep trying it, right? We try it. We sometimes try it on our family members, but we try it on ourselves the most. And it just doesn't work. So we need to figure out a way around it, right? Because we just keep going around the same cycle. And we feel bad, and all right, I'm gonna start over tomorrow. And guess what happens the next day? You show up to work, there's 1 day old donuts, and you know they're not even as good as they were the day before, but instead of all the nonsense of going back and forth, you go right to it. You're like, this time, I'm just gonna eat the donut right away. And then you feel even worse. Now you ate a donut that's a day old and it's weird, and you feel bad, and you're like, that's it. Next week, I'm starting over next week. So we really need to figure out how to change our internal dialogue, how to be our own best advocate instead of this voice that's trying to bring us down from the inside, right? Like, aren't we on the same team? It's sort of strange. It doesn't, from a logical, rational standpoint, it doesn't really make any sense. But I promise you this is incredibly common, and everyone who experiences it thinks they're alone. They think, what is wrong with me? Why am I like this? And there goes the guilt again. But I promise you, this is very common thinking. And it's very damaging. And it sure doesn't help us be better people. So instead, I'd like to propose that maybe we catch ourselves with this voice. And so the first thing you have to do is know that it's happening, right? You've got to be aware that this is something you do. So you've got to catch yourself and say, oh, I'm doing it again. Now, there's no reason, you don't need to like be judgmental on yourself, right? You're just like, oh, there's that thing I'm doing again. Okay, no big deal, no judgment, I'm just recognizing it, I'm doing it again. So first step. But the next step then is, how are you going to interrupt that voice? You've always listened to that voice. It gets in there, it's really strong, and it's making you feel bad. How do you turn it around? How do you stop the voice, take some of the power out of that voice, change the subject altogether? After you recognize it, then it's kind of your choice. You might need to play around with what works. Sometimes you can literally just say like, shush, you know? Sometimes that's all it takes, like, get out of here. Sometimes you've got to really like change the subject in your head, literally, and just start thinking about something else. Like, what are you doing today? What's your next thing? Start describing your environment to yourself. I see some grass and some people in a building. I mean, literally, who cares? Just fill your brain with something else so that voice is like drowned out. Another approach could be maybe a little more positive and not just getting that voice quieted, but actually replaced by something more positive, like, you know, I'm doing the best I can. I know what I'm doing. I got this. I've been living my whole life as a human. I know how to do it. Like, I'm good, you know? So something, it doesn't, I don't know, it could be something else. But you say something that boosts you up instead of this idea of like, I can't, I'm no good, blah, blah, blah. I'm good. I know just what I'm doing. I'm allowed to eat food. I'm allowed to eat donuts, in fact. Has anyone ever told themselves they're allowed to eat donuts? It's really empowering. And not just like, okay, you can have a bite of a donut, you can have a half a donut. Like, you can literally have as many donuts as feels good in your body. As long as you're listening to your whole body, you can eat donuts. Because I promise your body will let you know when you've had too many donuts, right? And if you're listening and you're not judging, then you stop when you've had enough, or maybe just a little beyond that. You're like, okay, there's the line. There's too many donuts, I'm here. So that's one idea. You just tell yourself, I trust me. I trust my body to tell me when it wants a donut and when it doesn't want a donut. Might sound kind of crazy if you're not used to giving yourself that permission, but it makes a big difference in your life. I talk about this a lot with my clients, and sometimes most of the time, people find this concept terrifying. To actually allow yourself without limits. I mean, we're not talking like free for all. We're just talking about the mental restriction we place on ourselves, right? I'm not actually saying to eat all the donuts out there. I'm saying you listen and you allow yourself to stop when you've had enough. And it takes the mental shift of giving yourself permission to have no donuts or a half or a quarter or whatever to, I trust me to figure it out. I'm going to eat donuts until my body says that's enough donuts. And it could be a quarter of a donut, but it's a totally different mindset when you've given yourself permission, because then you eat that however much of donut and you finished, you walk away, and guess what happens? You're not thinking about donuts anymore. You've moved on to, maybe you're at work, right? Weren't we at work? And you're back to work doing whatever you're supposed to be doing. You're no longer thinking about donuts. But when you place a limit on yourself of how much you're allowed to have, you walk away, and whether you ate that much or you ate twice as much as that limit, and you can't get it out of your head. Like, man, all I want to do is eat more donuts. So this restrictive mindset that we place on ourselves, even if we're not following through on the restriction, that mindset is really the thing that gets us in trouble and wanting more and feeling like I can't be trusted with donuts. I can't control myself. I don't know when to stop. It's all created by that mindset, that same mindset that doesn't want you to do it, but does want you to do it. Like I said, I don't know why we have that. I wish I knew. But what we really want to do is just allow, just unconditional permission to eat food that your body wants and that feels good. When you figure out what doesn't feel good and it's not tied up with this idea of like what you should or shouldn't do, it's merely a simple fact of that doesn't feel good in my body, it's a lot easier to say, no, I don't think I want that. I don't like how that makes me feel. And you move on. So what I'm hoping is, as I'm talking, you're coming up with some ideas for yourself of like, what are some things that you might talk to yourself about? What are some ways that you can shift your own thinking about whatever that mean voice says to you that's critical and tells you you're no good at it or that you can't do it? What can you tell yourself instead? And the other thing that might help too is if you imagine you're talking to someone else. We have like different rules for ourselves than we have for everybody else, right? We are most critical when it comes to ourselves. And other people, we can give grace all day long. So just imagine you're talking to someone else. It's a good friend of yours or someone in your family, and they're struggling with this, voice in their head. What would you want to say to that person in support of them? And how would you suggest that they talk to this, bully, basically? And it might make it easier because, like I said, when it comes to ourselves, we tend to be pretty critical, and we think, this is different for me. It's not. I promise. So I'm wondering. So I want to come back around to, like I said, the resources that I mentioned. I spent a lot of time working with people on this whole thing I'm talking about. It is called intuitive eating, and it really helps you just change your whole approach to food. It's not even about like what's healthy stuff or the things people usually think dietitians talk about, like fruits and vegetables and stuff. I mean, sure, we can talk about that, but it's about how do you think about food? How do you approach food? How do you think about the way you eat? And this is a pretty long process. So, just being able to talk to you guys for a little bit about it tonight, what I'm hoping is happening is it's, just starting with a thought, starting to get you to question like, oh, maybe that's not the right approach. Maybe I do that. But that first step to getting to the place where you've given yourself unconditional permission to eat donuts, there's a lot of stuff that happens in between. You may not be ready to jump in with that. So that's why I mentioned those resources in the beginning. There are lots of ways to help yourself work through some of this stuff. If this is stuff that sounds like, okay, cool, I can change my thinking, awesome. If you feel like you'd like to read a little bit more, then I would really encourage checking out my website for a few different books that are on this topic. I also, like I said, there are some great podcasts. Sometimes you need to hear a message multiple times and a couple of different ways, a couple of different people talking about it, explaining it. I think podcasts are great for that. And then there's that workbook that really helps you, with probing questions, and you really get in there and you answer the questions that are presented in the workbook, and really think about what's going on and how to work through some of those things. So I thought I would just give you a little chance to, I don't know if anyone has any questions. I'm happy to answer any questions about that. I could talk for 2 hours, but I was trying to keep it short, so now it's even shorter than I meant for it to be. So I don't know if there's anything that anybody has they'd like to hear more about, or you can ask me about fruits and vegetables too. I can talk about that. Oh, there we go. Thank you. I didn't see him.
How do you deal with intuitive eating if you have diabetes or these strain in your diet?
Yes, that's an awesome question. How does intuitive eating work with diabetes or high cholesterol or all those kinds of things, right? Well, it works great, actually. It's awesome. And I see a lot of people with conditions, and they are told, you've got to eat like this, you can't eat that stuff, and this is bad for you, and you've got to, lose 1 million pounds and all sorts of stuff. And the truth is that having a healthy relationship with food where you're not preoccupied with these foods that you kind of put in this forbidden box is going to lead to a healthier lifestyle, and it's more sustainable, and it allows you to be on the same page as your body instead of fighting your body. So when your doctor says you've got to cut out carbs or sugar or both, or all the things, and then you're wondering even what to eat. When you have all these restrictions placed on you, it doesn't work. It doesn't mean you're going to follow it. When you're in touch with your body and you figure out, gosh, if I eat 2 donuts, or if I drink a 20 ounce of soda, regular soda, and then my blood sugar goes really high, it doesn't feel good. And instead of saying like, I'm not allowed to eat soda or drink soda, I shouldn't have that, it's bad for me, it's bad for my blood sugar. If you take all of that judgment away and you simply observe yourself, it's a lot easier to say, no, I don't think I'll drink soda because that makes me feel really bad. You know, it's that whole mindset of, I'm not supposed to have that, and I really want that, right? That's what happens when you say, I'm not supposed to eat that. So my approach with folks with conditions that maybe need to eat a certain way is, let's start with a clean slate and neutralize food. All food is okay. There's nothing that's bad or wrong or forbidden. We're just going to listen to our bodies, and we're going to trust our bodies to tell us what feels good. And when you're like on the same team with your body, it's a lot easier to figure out where to go from there. Like I said, I could keep going on. Does that answer your question? Thank you for asking that one. Yes, I'm sorry. The website is freestatenutrition.com. That is the website. And so there, go to the resources page, and there's books recommended, there's podcasts, there's also like blogs for like recipes, and I forget what else. Lots of good stuff on there. freestatenutrition.com.
I have a question. How do you best support someone who's struggling with eating issues? Like as a loved one, seeing somebody else struggle to manage their eating, what are like some do's and don'ts?
Yeah, great question. So when the question is, what do we do to support someone who is struggling with eating? So maybe it's not you, it's someone in your life. And it's super tricky, and obviously it depends on what the problem is. It depends on the severity of the problem. I think it's always important to come from a place of love and caring, and just make that clear, that that's why you're even bringing it up. Like, I'm concerned for your health, and you know, from there it just depends what's going to happen. You know, if you're really truly worried that someone is hurting themselves, then then maybe severe action is required. Maybe you talk with their doctor, or something along those lines. But if it's not quite like that, I think just expressing, I'm really worried about you, and I would like to know how to help you. And you may not know what you're going to do to help them, but that's okay. You'll find a way. Yeah. Is there anything else? Those are really good questions. All right, we have just a couple more minutes, so I'm hoping you guys are going to head over there and learn how to make bee houses and stuff. That sounded really cool. So I really appreciate you coming and listening to me, and hope I gave you a little something to think about. Maybe you'll, when you're on my website, I have one of those annoying pop-up things. I'll ask you to join my newsletter. So maybe you'll do that, get some more ideas, and hear from me more often. But anyway, thanks for having me. Thanks to the library.
Thank you so much, Heather. So we will be uploading this video onto the library's YouTube account. So if you want to rewatch it, or we'll include her link as well. So yeah, thanks for coming out. Have a nice evening.